Egypt to Japan without flying, day 121, part 2. After boarding the train of hell from Uzbekistan, we still had 10 hours to cross the vast desert expanse into Kazakhstan. Sitting in a cramped space with two families, we were switching turns, sleeping on the upper bunk. It was next to one of the very few open windows, but it's the summer desert, so it's like using an air dryer on your face. Nevertheless, I was happy after 3 hours it was finally my turn to sleep a bit. I was the fourth person to sleep there, so it was a cocktail mix of sweats of 3 other people plus mine. Nice sleep. The scenery outside matched the conditions inside. Uninhabitable. When we reached the borders, we had the Uzbek authorities check our passports, and we finally had a chance to get out of the oven train to stretch our legs and our soles. As you can see from outside, most windows aren't even designed to open. We found a tap with water from underground, and on this day it was like finding a gold mine, and everyone filled their water bottles. There was no Kazakh immigration at the border in the desert, so we continued for another 3 hours until we arrived into town. There is where immigration and custom officers boarded the train. They sat inside and we took turns in the opposite seat. And of course I got special treatment with extracurricular questions. The main reasons being, as I caught on from their chats, being a Muslim and the Afghanistan visa in my passport. They even called in another guy to board the train and he interrogated me in a separate room. I was asked about my family, my religion, and even if I prayed every day. But to be honest, that was the easiest interrogation ever because it was done over Google Translate. Eventually, innocent until proven guilty prevailed. I got my stamp and I was let off the train. Egypt to Japan without flying, day 122. This morning I found myself waking up in a train in Kazakhstan. What a life. The country looks flat. I arrived in the city of Aktau on the Caspian Sea, then took a local transport bus towards my hostel, which looked very clean, and I had this spacious room all to myself for $11. And most importantly, AC, which if you've seen my video from yesterday, you'd know how happy I am now. With also this common space where I realized this place is like a residence for female Russian students, and I was the only guy there. Felt like a party crasher. I was also pretty happy to do my laundry after a few sweaty days in Uzbekistan. The hostel is in a very fancy residential area and I had to walk 20 minutes anytime I wanted to eat. I went to this place to have dinner and look what they had on the TV. A video from Japan. It's a sign. Then I went grocery shopping and had a scenic walk back to the hostel, where I'll rest for a day. Egypt to Japan without flying, day 124. In my first stop in Kazakhstan, I wanted to go see many natural attractions in the desert nearby. I asked around for the tour and the company I connected with was asking me extraordinary amounts for being a foreigner, which I declined. I considered renting a car, but they didn't approve of my Egyptian license, so I decided to go on my own. Hitchhike into the desert, do some trekking, do some camping. Not a real concrete plan, but just following the locations on the map. I checked out of my hostel, and as I was walking out, I was thinking of the harsh conditions I would be facing. I have to admit, I wasn't really sure about this decision. I stopped by for a wrap lunch and I shared my plan with the place owner. When I told him where I'm going, he advised me not to go on my own. A couple of girls in the background overheard me and decided to step in. They told me they went to these places before on a tour and shared with me the contact information of the tour operator, which wasn't possible for me to find on my own because it's only in the local language. Then they helped me book a tour on the spot. Phew, I feel like disaster was averted. Very thankful that I met them. I got a heavenly watermelon flavored iced tea and was all smiles on my way back to the hostel, where I checked in 2 hours after I checked out. And back to the same bed. And tomorrow go on a cool tour into the desert. Egypt to Japan without flying, day 125. I started the day by going to the supermarket for snacks, as today we're going on a tour into the desert in southwestern Kazakhstan. The guide explained some safety precautions on the way, and I really wished I learned Russian before this trip. It was a 3-hour drive before our first stop, so we entertained ourselves by playing cards in the van. I know the rules of this game now, unlike Uzbekistan. Sometimes on the way we shared the road with camels, and I was really surprised of how good the roads were given how remote we were going. In our first stop, we saw interesting petroglyphs and we performed wudu, which is what Muslims do before prayers, as we were going into the underground house of one of the first Muslim scholars in the region. Then we entered the underground mosque, which is definitely a first, and I prayed there. Then we got some water from underground and we went for lunch in this village guest house, where by the way any visitor can sleep for free. And then we were off to our second stop, another underground mosque, but this time not really accessible, so we have to do some proper hiking to get there. Oh, and did I mention it was hot? Like, really, really hot. Finally, when we got into the second one, we performed group prayers. And on the way up, I convinced the two guides to join me on the more adventurous route of the hiking path. Then for our third and final stop of the day, we had to do some off-roading to get to the beautiful natural rock formations in the area. This was the place I was most excited to see. Egypt to Japan without flying, day 126. I checked out of my hostel this morning, and before leaving, I went to take the local transport bus for a little sightseeing tour. I noticed richness in the area here due to the natural resources nearby. I got off at the last stop next to the Caspian Sea. I took a little dip alongside some locals, and before leaving I noticed this free gym, so I put in a little workout also. Then I was on my way to the train station as I was about to take a very long train. For lunch I entered this little diner and had a local dish of noodles. And I entered the supermarket and got as many snacks as I could carry in anticipation of the long journey. Okay, now I'm ready for the train that will take 46 hours to get to the capital in the north. And this little corner on it here will be my home in the world for the next 2 days. And very shortly after departure, I have guests over at my place. This group of students who are on their way to a national competition in Astana, and this kind gentleman sitting across from us. It was definitely the busiest corner of the train, and we had a lot of fun getting to know each other.
Thank you.
As the train cuts through the giant Central Asian steppe, I go to sleep with a smile on my face, and very excited to see how we're all together gonna spend the full day on the train tomorrow. Egypt to Japan without flying, day 127, aka train day. I woke up behind my makeshift privacy curtain, in my corner on the train that's taking us across Kazakhstan. 12 hours in, 34 to go. For breakfast I had a bag of croissants as I watched the scenery outside crossing the Eurasian steppe. The train has a kitchen on board, equipped with a water cooler, a microwave and a fridge, and also a bathroom that's sufficient for the journey. And in case you're a smoker, you can do it in between cars on the move. There are barely any big cities on the way, and every few hours we would make a stop at a small settlement, but barely anyone gets on or off. Most people are on the train from start to finish. So how do we spend our time? Well, games of course. With my train buddies from yesterday, we opened the day with Uno. Then this man challenged me to a chess game, Kazakhstan versus Egypt, which I lost unfortunately. Damn! Then I taught the group the classic backpacker game, Cambio, which made a lot of other passengers curious to watch. Quick check on the landscape? Yeah, still the same. Was really fascinating to me how we can cover that big a distance without the landscape changing. We continued by playing games on the phone, which they got the better of me, played cards with little girls on the train. Then the guy asked me for another chess game, where I got my sweet revenge this time. We made the last stop of the day where food shops were specifically set up for the train. After everyone got their dinner, I ate mine on the train, plov out of a plastic bag. We had a beautiful sunset, and as I was going to sleep, I noticed we were almost caressing the Russian border. Good night. Egypt to Japan without flying, day 128. It's day 3 of the train journey across Kazakhstan. And since boarding, the view of the Eurasian steppe has not changed, which still fascinates me. I had breakfast alongside the train conductor and some kids, and we got back to business of spending time by playing cards. Then we connected with fellow passengers to solve a crossword puzzle together. It was in Kazakh language, so I was basically their advisor on geography-related questions. Then I had instant noodles for lunch, which was the most popular choice among passengers on such a long journey. Then, as we approached the capital, the girls got ready, and we finally arrived after 46 hours on the train. I was welcomed at the station by Miras and Ali, who are friends of Almas, a local friend who contacted me when I entered Kazakhstan. Although he's out of town, he arranged for my accommodation, for me to meet his brothers and his friends, and for them to show me around the city. Wow, what amazing hospitality and generosity. The city looked very modern, but we had a ton of traffic since the South Korean president was in town. When they dropped me off at my 5-star hotel accommodation, you should have seen my face. I was like a kid going to Disneyland. Such stark contrast to my dirty backpack and sliders on my feet. That was definitely a first of its kind on this journey. Haven't had this kind of hotel experience in years. I'm not used to this. Then we went for a walk around the area and we passed by the Kazakh version of the White House. We met up with more of their friends for dinner at a restaurant with traditional dishes. We started with a shot of camel milk and I had horse meat for the main course, which was also a first. The waiters performed a local dance. We had dessert and then walked back to the hotel for a restful night. Egypt to Japan without flying, days 129 and 130. I woke up in my first 5-star stay in my journey and had a delicious breakfast. There were a lot of options. I was like a kid at a Toys R Us. Then my new local friends took me sightseeing. First to the National Museum, where I was welcomed with a guided tour and learned for the first time that dinosaurs used to roam on those lands. Also learned a lot about the history of the nomad Kazakhs, and there was even a Da Vinci piece on display here. We concluded the visit by trying out traditional clothes. How do I look? Then we went ahead to the Grand Mosque, which was very recently finished, and it reminded me actually of the Abu Dhabi one. It looked very beautiful. Then we went ahead to a bazaar and expo where we had great views of the city and kids got to be Transformers for the day. For dinner, we went to a fancy traditional restaurant where they had live performance of Kazakh music. And I had horse meat. Again, it was just so good the first time. And horse milk, which I'm not as big a fan of. Then the next day, remember the team of students I met on the train coming here? They were coming here for a tug-of-war competition, so I went there to give them my full support as their new Egyptian older brother. And they won! Yes, very proud of them. That evening we went cycling in town and even around the Kazakh White House, and I pampered myself back at the hotel spa. With a sauna, steam room, went for a swim and a jacuzzi. Might be the only time I have the stuff on the journey. Egypt to Japan without flying, day 132. After checking out of the hotel, I went with my local friends to have lagman for lunch, a popular dish of noodles in Central Asia. Then they gave me a lift to the train station, which looked fairly modern. So where am I going? Well, the plan is to get from Astana to Almaty, which is a long enough distance as it is. The problem is that all trains were fully booked. So I booked a 17-hour train to far eastern Kazakhstan, where I'll be right next to Russia, Mongolia and China, transit for 7 hours, then take a 27-hour train down south, making a total journey time of 51 hours. I boarded the train and it looked different from previous ones. This time there are private rooms with 4 people in each room. I had upper bunk and was tired, so I made the bed immediately in anticipation of an early night. But little did I know this was gonna be a social space. I shared the room with 2 Kazakhs and a Tajik. We had dinner and tea together with the Eurasian steppe as our wallpaper and socialized for hours. Too many hours actually that I had to leave for bed at some point, but they continued on. Egypt to Japan without flying, days 133 and 134, let's go! For the 4th time already in Kazakhstan, I find myself waking up on a train, right next to the Russian border. I arrived in eastern Kazakhstan for a 7-hour transit, and how am I spending it? Going for a hike. Some locals at the train station helped me with logistics, and I took a local transport bus crossing the entire city, all the way until I got to the suburbs. Oh look, a plane! It's been a while since I've been on one of those. I went there to hike a hill with the big Kazakhstan written on it. I ignored the road and made my way up for a gorgeous view of the city and the river. The way down was not too shabby also, always taking the scenic route. I got pastries from this lovely lady and took the bus back to the train station to board another train for 27 hours to Almaty. I boarded and was surprised that I had all this space to myself. But that dream didn't last long, as the train filled up on the second stop. So who are my neighbors this time? James, an American who's teaching English here, and 2 Kazakh women. Interesting mix, and we went to sleep with a full moon shining through the window. The next morning, James and I had instant noodles for breakfast and socialized with other passengers. Where, of course, we played cards and, of course, I taught them cambio. I noticed the scenery outside started becoming more hilly, and then a Korean boarded the train. Now it's 3 of us foreigners on the train, and we thought of a joke. Now an Egyptian, an American, and a Korean board the train in Kazakhstan. Okay, we didn't really finish it, but we thought it's a great start to a joke, right? When the train stopped in a village, James and I got off in search for dessert after all those noodles, but we didn't find any shop selling any kind of thing, and later finally when we arrived, the local was kind enough to give us both a lift. Egypt to Japan without flying, days 135 to 137. I left my hostel in Almaty to go on a tour with Join Me Asia to explore the beautiful nature nearby. We met in the parking lot of the town circus and with 2 buses left the city. We made a stop on the way for snacks and after a 5-hour drive arrived in a village in the mountains and settled into our neat accommodation. It was only by morning where we could really appreciate the scenery around. We had omelette for breakfast, then were picked up by old vans that were originally designed for the Soviet military. It was a bumpy ride up the mountains to say the least until we reached the end of the road. You could take a horse to continue, but I decided to hike the beautiful trail all the way to Kindy Lake. A lake formed due to earthquakes not too long ago with spectacular colors and trees growing out of it. We made our way back down to our old Soviet vehicles, but don't be fooled by their appearances, they're pretty tough and even got us across some rivers. We had lunch back in the village, then went to a second lake which was very popular with locals on a summer weekend. And for pretty good reason. After a dinner of big dumplings, I went for an early night. And the next morning we left the beautiful village to go explore canyons. We drove past colorful fields, explored the Black Canyon, the Lunar Canyon, which I really liked because of the contrast of greenery and desert, and then Sharin Canyon, which looks like the smaller cousin of the Grand Canyon. We walked through this beautiful landscape with questionably balanced rocks and ended up in a river where we got to chill a bit. And actually I was recognized by strangers on 3 different occasions that day, which was really new to me. Then on the way back I got a pancake sandwich ice cream to conclude this hot day and we returned to the city. Egypt to Japan without flying, days 138 to 141. Upon arrival in Almaty in southern Kazakhstan, my local friend Almas insisted on sending his driver and putting me in a nice hotel, even though he wasn't in town. I spent a couple of days chilling, doing laundry, meeting locals for dinner, and an insane coincidence where I bumped into a French ex-colleague of mine from when we worked together in Luxembourg. I was then invited by the local tourism office where I gave them a visit, they showed me around and even gave me some gifts. We then hopped in a car and went for a day trip outside the city in the mountains. We then got geared up and prepared to ride mountain bikes. After making sure I'm capable, we then had a scenic ride up to Big Almaty Lake, where we walked around a bit, posed for pictures. Then, of course, I asked if there was a more adventurous off-road option. So the owner took me to this gorgeous valley where we crossed rivers and biked for 2 wonderful hours in nature. Back in the city, I had dinner with my friend Almas, who was so generous in welcoming me to Kazakhstan. And the next day we played tennis together. I chilled by the pool and in the evening took yet another long overnight train to my next state, Turkestan. This time we had a big room with 6 beds and I had upper bunk as always. Egypt to Japan without flying, days 142 to 144. Still in Kazakhstan, I was invited by the tourism office in Shymkent to join other bloggers in a group tour of the city. I made the trip with a 15-hour train ride, but it was so worth it. By the way, this is how it looks to be on tour with bloggers. First, we did a walking tour in the old town where we saw some ruins, tried our hands at pottery, and had local women prepare traditional snacks for us. I gave it a go myself, and turns out I'm not the worst chef in the world. There we had a beautiful musical performance. Then we had a tour of a local brewery, had a delightful evening walk, tried traditional clothes, visited the central mosque which just opened last month, and we decided to call it the Kazakh Taj Mahal. Also visited the retro car museum with vintage cars from many eras. At an art gallery, watched the process of hand-making carpets, and also later in contrast how they're made in a factory. And in the evening we attended a local football game and cheered for the local team. And even got the chance to meet the players after. The next day we checked out the botanical garden, which reminded me of the Amazon a bit. Oh, and I forgot about the food. The food. My oh my. We were dined very well. Every lunch and every dinner felt and tasted like a special occasion. On the last day, I tried to play a local musical instrument, got interviewed, where I said a few words in Kazakh, Kazakhstan, Minim Atam Omar, and gave a little speech to thank the organizers for this wonderful tour. Egypt to Japan without flying, days 145 to 147. Our blog tour continues to the city of Turkestan, in the region of Turkestan, in southern Kazakhstan. Stan. On the way, we visited a beautiful cave and I was amazed by the greenery inside. Then we passed by ruins of an old city that was destroyed by the Mongols. Arriving in the city afterwards, we went to an 8D cinema. It was such an immersive experience. We felt hot, cold, wind, even water was splashed at us. I hope one day they make movies like this. The next day we walked around Old Town and we got to meet, let's say, peculiar police officers. We saw kids singing a patriotic song. Then we visited the main mausoleum, where the architecture reminded me a bit of the architecture of the Silk Road cities in Uzbekistan. I got the chance to ride a two-humped camel for the first time. Then we spent the afternoon at the pool, where we swam, relaxed, and played Uno with some local kids. Of course, as always, the food did not disappoint, and I rocked a wig for a temporary change in style. In the evening, we visited the newer part of town, which was inspired by Venice, where we took a gondola ride in the canal for a beautiful conclusion to this tour. Then I made my way back to Almaty on a 15-hour overnight train, where I used my water bottle as an alternative to AC.